Yellow, ladies and gentlemen, Strom back. This time, it's technical Minecraft, but you're a cheapskate. Let's get to it. First, let's cover what it means to be a Minecraft cheapskate. First of all, everything needs to be built real cheap, like cobblestone, dirt, so your basic wood. Then we need to build it out of as few nether materials as possible. Those things you can only get in the nether, like quartz or soul sand, things like that. We're also going to exclude things like slime, so you don't have to have any slime farm, or if you're in a world where you just can't find a swamp yet, but you still need to do something. But at the same time, everything still needs to be reliable, because you may want to put other valuable things through this, and you still need to have reliance out of it. So why would you want to do this? You're saying it's ridiculous. Just set up a quick and dirty slime farm. Just, go through the nether portal and grab some quartz with your pickaxe. It's fine. So here's some reasons. First one being the early game, you may not have access to these materials yet, like we said, with slime or some of the other stuff we're going to get into. We got things like Skyblock, where you aren't going to have specific access to materials for quite some time, so some of those things won't even come till late game anyways. Maybe you're a person who's scared of the nether. It happens. There's nothing wrong with it, nothing to be ashamed of, but, you're used to playing on easy mode, you join a server that's hard mode, and suddenly you just don't want to look at those portals. You could be just plain cheap. You just want to build something quickly out of the resources you got lying around. One of my favorite reasons, and the reason I actually made this video, is just some variety. You just have different options to do things that you want to do. Maybe you're playing in an older version of the game that doesn't have these materials, like you don't have access to honey blocks because you're an early version of the game. You just plain out want to confuse your friends and have them say, wait, that shouldn't work. Why does that work? Maybe you're playing on peaceful mode where, the only way to get your slime is from a wandering trader or doing a panda slime farm, and, you don't have access to those things yet because those are projects to set up. Or lastly, you lost your base. You can't find it. You should probably take down coordinates, but I guess it could happen. So with all these things in mind, we are going to take a look at 24 different versions of how you can be a cheapskate. Before we get started, there will be a world download where you can look at these and look at the exact details of how they work down the video description, so go down there and check that out. And then there will also be timestamps by section here, so we're going to go through each one of these lines. There will be timestamps down there as well. Another thing before we get into this, I think the important thing is that I am not recommending that these ways in the green slots are better in any particular way. This is just kind of more for fun. So these are cheaper options. There are some of these things that I've actually come to start using just because I like their layout better, and we'll get into those. But this video is going to be more for just having some fun with redstone. First thing is probably something that everyone already knows about, but that's mob persistence. You can, of course, name them with a name tag, but if you don't have access to name tags yet, let's say you haven't got your villager hall going, you can just find a zombie that will pick up items. There are certain zombies, and that changes in percentage based on what difficulty you're on, but they will be able to pick up items that you throw on the ground, and if they pick up an item in their hand there, they then won't despawn. Next, we have transportation. Of course, you could just set up a rail line, but then you've got to have all the iron and the powered rails and the redstone to do it, and, that's fine. He won't despawn inside that minecart, or you can get him in a boat and he won't despawn, and then you can just boat him around anywhere. Now, you may say, well, you can't get in the boat with him. However, if you're on a server and you have a friend join you, you can actually leave the area and have that friend grab the aggro of the zombie, and then he will be distracted. So you can actually get in the boat with him, and he's not going to attack you. You can see I'm down in survival there. I'm not getting attacked by the zombie because he's focused on my friend. Also, why bother mining for diamonds to make your tools when you can just get some villagers up, get them up real quick, and they're not that difficult to level up, especially if you got some iron. A lot of them will buy iron, and you can just level them up that way over and over again. And then, boom, you can just buy your diamond tools, you can buy your diamond armor, and you don't have to ever go mining diamonds again. And finally, another thing a lot of people know about is obsidian. So it has a lot of properties. It's not sticky, it's not destructible, it's not pushable. So, I can run that sticky block against it, it won't slide. I can't push it using a piston, and then it also won't blow up from that TNT. But we have alternatives for that too. Things like leaves and pumpkins also don't stick, and those are easy to get. A lot of the workstations we use, things like furnaces, those aren't pushable. So if you need a block that is both not sticky and not pushable, you can just use a furnace. So that's only 8 cobblestone. And then 119 also added that we can waterlog leaf blocks. So that means not only are they a non-sticky block, but they're also an indestructible block that just keeps their water. So any other waterlog block was already non-explodable. But leaves will contain their water naturally without having other blocks around them. So if I just light both of these up, we can see that both the obsidian and the leaves are going to be fine. So once again, those are all some basic concepts, but now let's start getting into some real redstone with some clocks. So this is your basic 4 game tick clock. You use a piston to push an observer in front of another observer, and then they go off every 4 game ticks. But we can also do the same thing with a torch burnout clock that's going to reset itself. So if I turn on this lever, we can see as soon as the one torch burns out, then the other one starts up. So we have a 4 game tick clock coming out of this block right here. So put those together. Those are both 4 game tick clocks. But this one we needed 2 quartz and a slime for the piston. This one is just cobblestone and a little bit of redstone dust. Next up, we have a long clock. So this is an etho hopper clock that has been filled up to the brim in one of the hoppers. So all the way filled up, this is going to be 4 minutes and 16 seconds. Or you can use a item despawn clock. So all we have here is we have a dropper with a pressure plate in front of it. And then there's a torch underneath it. So what's going to happen when we unlock this, it's going to spit out an item onto the wooden pressure plate. It has to be a wooden pressure plate. And that item is going to stay there as long as, we as the player don't walk up to it. And as soon as that despawns in 5 minutes from the time it was shot out, then we're going to get another signal out of here. But then this torch is going to turn on and shoot out another thing. So this is a just over 5 minute clock. There is a little bit of game ticks in there over the 5 minutes because you have to take into account the torch turning back on and the item spitting out until the time it pushes down on the pressure plate, etc., etc. But it's going to be a pretty consistent 5 minute clock. Next up, variable clocks. So once again, we're looking at the etho hopper clock because this is nice and easy to make a variance. You can go down really low. You can fill it up halfway all the way. You can really make a good extension of your clock. But you can also do this with just repeaters that turn off their input signal here. So this is just an example where we've just got these repeaters here. So you can just add as many repeaters as you want onto here. And this is going to be 8 game ticks per full repeater. And of course you have your wiggle room in there with your 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then an extra 2 game ticks for the torch action. And then when we turn that on by turning off the lever, then you're going to have a nice little clock that's going to repeat. Finally, in the clocks, we have a 49 game tick clock. That's a really weird number. I didn't even want to make an actual clock that was 49 game ticks because odd game tick clocks are really weird to deal with. But look at this right here. We have a nice and easy 49 game tick clock. We just have a gravity block on top of the piston. And the sound of the gravity block falling onto the piston head is what sets off this skulk sensor. And then activates the piston as well to reset it. So we see here, I've frozen the game. We can see that piston has just started extending. I'm going to do tick step 49. So I'm going to step 49 ticks. And every single time it's going to be ending up in that same spot whenever I advance these steps. So it's stepping forward 49 ticks and then freezing. So we can see it's consistent there. What exactly you would need this for, I don't know, but it's still no nether materials, and you can find deep dark caves without actually finding a deep dark city and worrying about wardens. So these are not that difficult to get. Next up, we have redstone activation circuitry. So these are randomizers. So this is a randomizer that's going to use a clock to shoot an item out of a dropper into a hopper, and that hopper is facing back into the dropper. And what it's going to do is we also have this here limiting the signal output. So anytime a 64 stackable comes into there, it's not going to give out a signal. But when a unstackable goes into there, it is going to give out a signal. So if I turn this on, we can see I'm going to get kind of a random signal that's coming into this light block here. And I can adjust this. I've set this so it's a really low chance on the randomization, but I can increase those chances by varying the amount of unstackables and stackables that I have in there. So let me just take this out so that we are increasing that chance that we're going to get that output. Or I can weight that even lower. You just want to make sure that you have items that aren't going to stack with each other so that you have those slots filled up. Because if you just have a 64 of a stack in there, it's randomly choosing one of these slots and then it's going to come back into that slot anyways. However, here's something much cheaper. It's a chicken. So this doesn't give as nice of a clean randomizer and it's not as controllable. But what we have here is we have some sort of block that the chicken doesn't want to pathfind to underneath this pressure plate. So in this case, I've chosen a redstone lamp. The chicken won't actually pathfind to the redstone lamp. He wants to pathfind to one of the cobblestone blocks that's surrounding it. And then we'll get a signal when he walks over it, and then it'll turn off. The nice thing about using, again, a stone pressure plate is even if he lays an egg on there, that's not going to activate. So you could do it the other way, too. If you want to have it that if he randomly drops an egg on there, it's going to stay on to add a little bit more weird randomization. Change that over to a wooden pressure plate. Here we have the T flip-flops. So, we've got some sticky piston. We've got some observer action going on. So this is whenever I give it an input signal, it's going to change the output state. And we have one here too, that we're just using a button and that sticky piston underneath to create a monostable circuit for that. But this is kind of one of the OG T flip-flops, and this is just using pistons and a redstone block and then a button here. So we just give an input signal there, and it's going to flip and flop in between the button presses. Speaking of monostable inputs, those can be really easy when you use observers or sticky pistons. So here we have just giving a piston a one-tick pulse by just having an observer go into it. Or here we've made a monostable circuit using that sticky piston. But here's an option that doesn't use any slime either. Once again, with the gravity block, because the gravity block will come back down. It'll still send that signal through, but then it'll reset itself. Long delayed input. So this is going to be for something kind of weird. I guess I don't know exactly when you'd be using this, but you want to be able to push a button and it takes a while before you get the signal that comes back out of it. So here we're using a comparator pulse extender. So we've got the quartz there, and then there we go. We see we just got our signal coming out. But you can also do this with just a bunch of repeaters as well. It may not be as classy, but if you don't have the quartz, you can still do it. So we can see the signal is going to weave through here and not affect the other lines, and then we get our signal output. This is something you probably wouldn't too often use for anything real practical. This would be more for, games or base ideas, things like that. But at that point, I feel like you probably got a little bit of quartz lying around, but still, this works. What happens if you need to go a long distance with an input signal to turn something on? So something like a mob switch where you don't want to load up all the mobs into your active chunks, but you need to turn on the chunk loader from a distance. So, just pretend that this was going out straight that way, but here I've just set it up to kind of curve back so we can save some space. But there we've got the signal that's traveling all that distance, and that's just fine. But remember, you can do that with redstone dust too. The reason I bring this up is because it feels like once you start getting into technical Minecraft and redstone, I see a lot of people saying, no dust, go dustless. Are you kidding? You're not dustless. This is ridiculous. Dust creates lag. What are you doing? You're ruining the world with dust. The thing with dust creating lag is it's much less of a problem than it used to be, but on top of that, it's really only when you have flashing dust. So in a case like this, where you just have an on button, or you just want to send in one signal, the MSPT required to actually send the signal through this line of redstone dust is so negligible. This would be like adding hopper locking to your one hopper iron farm. It's just not done. And in fact, it's probably comparable to having the observers flash on and off through the line. And finally, for circuits, control panels. So, you may have seen these where you have alternating sticky blocks that at the end of the line have a redstone block so you can turn on individual panels right next to each other so they don't intersect with the other lines. So you can see the lamps are turning on at the end there with whichever one I'm pressing, and it's not interfering with each other. But we can do that with redstone dust too. We've just had to do a little finagling to make sure that the redstone dust lines don't touch with each other, because obviously, if you put down redstone lines next to each other, then they're just going to touch each other. But we've just cut that off with some blocks and using some repeaters to make sure we control that. And we can do the same thing. So I'm gonna flip this switch. I'm gonna go into free cam so we can see it coming on. Same thing with this switch over here. So it's the fourth one over. I'm gonna flick the lever and we can see just that fourth one comes on. And all that is just, once again, some kind of solid block and then redstone and repeaters. Next up, we have the storage tech line. So you can do the system where you have a hopper minecart going underneath your solid blocks to actually pick up your items. So if I drop an item on top of these solid blocks here, that hopper minecart is going to pick that up. deliver it back over to my hoppers. And especially in 1.19, there are systems where you can actually just have the hopper minecart unload immediately by breaking the hopper minecart and then resending it out. But don't forget, for your small designs, just using hoppers underneath partial blocks can work just as well. So any of these partial blocks, we got these path blocks, stone cutters, slabs, trapdoors. Item falls on there and it goes right into the hopper. Now there is a point when you start making this a giant field of hoppers that it will become extremely comparable to just using a couple of minecarts here. So those minecarts are going to be barely MSPT compared to what this is. But when you've got these small systems, things like your early game iron farms, your small farms where you just got to do like a micro farm, this can work just as well. A single item filter. This is getting a little ridiculous, but it's like, how do we use one that doesn't use the comparator? So what we have here is we have this system that has lava buckets inside of it, and once we dispense lava, we want to actually take that empty bucket out and make room for a new lava bucket, and we want to put that empty bucket down in this chest. But at the same time, you don't want to actually take out any lava buckets, so you got to make sure you have an item filter. This could be things like when you're converting lava to obsidian. What we have here is a version that has no quartz, and this is once again a very limited use case scenario here. It's not technically an item filter, but what we've done is we've just filled up this hopper and this dropper with these same items that we want to have coming out of there. We just need to make sure that we're also emptying this dropper out at the same amount that we want to be emptying this dropper out. So in this case, I've just set this up so that this activates at the same time this does. So when I press this button, it's going to eject some lava, and then that empty bucket is going to get sucked into here. But then this is going to spit one out into the chest, and so now we have one slot available to suck one in here. Again, this is probably a real stretch. There aren't really many scenarios where you can do this, except when items are going to be converting, but it's nice to have in your arsenal to not have to fit this big wide thing in there in order to do that. Another method to save some materials with an item filter, we're going to save 1 redstone dust and 1 block of width. It's so amazing. I know. Just hold your applause till the end. I'm kidding. This is your normal T sorter. This is 41 of the items that you want to sort getting put into that filter there. And so this is completely tieable. You can put other modules right next to it that sort other things. And even if this chest overflows and this hopper overflows and then this overflows, you don't have to worry about it breaking your other slices. But if you have scenarios where you just have maybe a couple of item types coming out of something and you don't really need to worry about tiling it perfectly together, then this system right here, you do still have to use that quartz. And so that kind of sucks. But it only takes 6 filter items. What we have here is we have 16 stackables. So this things like ender pearls, signs, eggs. And then what that's going to do is it's just going to give us up to signal strength 2 in order to deactivate this lock and then start filtering the items. But then we only take 6 items. Well, technically 7, because the hopper right below is going to actually hold on to 1. But that means if you have some valuables that you want to sort out, you don't want to fill it up to that 41 level. Maybe you've got things like some mob heads coming out of a mob head farm, your diamonds, your ancient debris, your netherite ingots, things like that. You don't have to have that full stack of 41 in order to start getting items down in the chest. Now this is fun. I started doing this on recent Skyblock world that I was playing with some friends. Item alignment. So, you normally can use things like honey because they're not block entities. And what that'll do is it'll line those items up so they're just barely over the hoppers and can get sucked up by the hoppers. And then you can put in, signs and ice to keep the items flowing so that they don't just stop on this block, because like if that was just glass there, the items would reach like right there and then stop and never reach the next water line. And then we destroy our items with some soul sand that's on fire, because the blue flame destroys items in the shortest amount of game ticks. And so we can see if I toss an item here, first place it's going to go is inside of that hopper because it's going to get sucked up. If I take all these hoppers away, so I can reach the end of the line, we can see we can get it into that next hopper down at the end. It's going to flow over there, find that path. That should have been a chest, not an amethyst shard. I realized that. I felt it was weird while I was recording it, but whatever. That should be a chest on an amethyst shard. So if I take out all those hoppers, then we send it down this way. There we go. We still get it sucked into there. And then this also has good overflow protection. You should always have overflow protection. So if everything gets filled up, it just gets burned instead of sitting in a water stream and taking up your server's MSPT. But honey means you have to get some bees, and ice means you need to find an ice biome with silk touch. And then obviously soul sand, you need to go to the nether. It's too expensive for me. Oh, I can't be bothered. Oh, I'm so cheap. So what I've done here is we have a similar water stream, but we're using a chest instead of the honey to align the item over the hoppers. And then all we have is we just have, once it reaches that point where it's going to run out and it would normally need a piece of ice there to keep the item going, we just drop it down one level. This does have the disadvantage of, you can't reliably have a hopper here to reliably pick up items. I mean, I've added this block so that items will fall under it. So technically we could add a hopper back in here. Let's go ahead and do that. But then we're going to see that those items can still go through, and then we just use a cactus to destroy them. You could also use a piece of netherrack with regular flame. You can find netherrack in the overworld ruin portals now, so that's not as big of a deal. But we can see that when I come here, and I'm going to break all these hoppers so we can use the top line and see that go through. So it just continues on with no issue, and I'll take out some more of these so we can see that. Drop that in, boom, it aligns, keeps going, it gets sucked up by that hopper. Another option for this, if you don't want to drop down your water stream, say you want to go for like a long distance, and you don't want to just keep dropping down and down and down and down until you're, like 20 blocks lower, what you can do is you can alternate the side that the water stream goes onto. And because we're aligning the item with this chest right here, so it's over the middle, it's not going to get caught inside the center of the hoppers because it's always going to be on the edge of the hopper. So we've just used this system to alternate the side that the water is going to be on. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on hitboxes here and start looking at this. So if I drop... Wow, that was a failure. So if I drop an item into the water stream, we're going to see it gets aligned and picked up in there. But now let me break these away. Drop it into the water stream, gets aligned, and then keeps going. Now let's just lock these to simulate those being full. And so the last hopper is the only one that's there, and I'll drop this in. And it's continue on that line just fine. Item elevators. So this is a big one that once again, you're going to need a piece of ice at least and some soul sand to make yourself a bubble column to get your item all the way up to the top. So I can see if I drop in an item here, it's going to flow down there, go into the bubble column, get shot up, and then flow over to where we want to align it. But again, ice and soul sand. I don't want to go looking for those things. That's such a pain. Look, I've got some wood. So all we have here is we have the same water stream, but then instead of the ice, we just have an air block that's going to make the item fall a little bit. But then we just use a slightly lower block to be able to catch the item. And then this isn't even a bubble column. It's just normal flowing water. So entities like people and mobs, well, certain mobs, I should say, are going to flow down to the bottom, but items in flowing water will still float upwards. It's just a little bit slower. So if I drop an item in there, we can see it's going to fly over, it's going to land in there, and then it's going to slowly float up to the top still. Until it gets all the way up here when it clears the wall and gets pushed over and still flows through just like our other option. Quote unquote auto dropper. There really is no way that I know of to do an actual auto dropper without having a comparator. So this is a normal auto dropper. What it means is whenever an item comes into this dropper here, it's going to sense that and it's going to send a signal to pulse back and forth. So this is if you have like maybe a bunch of items coming in, you don't want to have these constantly firing. Only when you have those items, things that are going to just take like kind of a blitz of items, and then it's going to be on pause for a while. Things like where you're setting off, sugarcane farms that are long distance. So you only have those coming in. You want to do an auto dropper. So if I just drop in 64 items in here, it's going to drop those automatically. This isn't really an auto dropper, but it's the same concept. We have a 4-game tick clock here. We just need to make sure that we have this turned on first. But then it's going to constantly send that signal in so that anything that is coming in, and let me grab a stackable, is going to get shot out as well. And then you could just have a water stream that starts here or water stream that starts there to carry those items away. All right, last section, and then I'll stop yammering on, I promise. These are some really weird use case scenarios. But we're going to start off with one that I've actually come to love, and this is TNT Dupers. So your normal TNT Duper that we've been using for years, you need slime, you need the minecart, you need to make sure that you get that on there without updating the TNT. You need to have a coral fan. So, this is pretty expensive. I mean, this is 6 slime blocks and a slime ball for the sticky piston. On top of that, you obviously need silk touch and you need to find a place that has coral fans. But then you send in a signal and you can just do some TNT duping with it. However, Iceberg Lettuce has come up with a slimeless and fanless TNT duper. So this is using quartz for observers. We're going to let that slide because here what we're saving is the slime and the fan. But this does the same thing. It dupes TNT. Nice thing about this is it perfectly aligns it. So we have that little visual glitch as it's falling where it looks like it's falling on the edge. But as soon as it lands, then it actually realigns itself. That's just a client-side visual glitch. And then there we go. We have no slime or fans or anything in there. Next up, spam protection. If you are on a server, I'm sure you have those circuits that you've done. It's okay. Well, I just got to make sure I don't spam the button too much. And then your friend comes along. He's like, "Hey, what disk do?" And then you've got something like gravity blocks. And he says, "Oh yeah, I wonder what this does." And I'm just going to go into free cam to show what's going to happen here when I start spamming this. I'm just going to do it over and over again. We're going to see, okay, now I broke a bunch of it. Now, if our circuit was dependent on having blocks up here in the air, our circuit's now broken. First thing you should do is get better friends. Like, that's an option for all of us. But if you can't, definitely add some spam protection to your input. So here's a scenario where we have a lever that is on a pulse extender. So this then stays extended so that it can't then retract until this is done. So even if I come back and spam this, all it's going to do is it's going to spam the pulse extender, but this piston is going to stay extended. So if I come here and I start smacking this lever, we can see all it's doing is it's just updating that pulse extender back there. And I can't actually spam the input too much. But that does require a quartz, and let's find a different way to do that. Technically, we could do that with some repeaters. So if you didn't know, if you send a signal into the side of a repeater, what's going to happen is it's going to turn up with this bedrock texture here, and it's going to lock that repeater to its current state. So even if I flick this on and off, we can see that's not turning on because it's locked to the off state. If I turn this off and then I turn this on, turn that on to send the signal on the side, no matter what I do with this lever, it's going to stay on because it's locked on. So I'm using that here with a set of delays to make sure that we are kind of locking and relocking these. So we're going to see the output here is going to be that piston. And even if I smack this lever, we're going to see that those are going to stay locked and in conjunction with each other so that that piston is staying up even though I'm flicking this lever. This isn't a very long extension because as we can see, I can kind of still get it in there pretty quick. But again, we're just doing that based on we don't need any sharp pulses getting sent in, or we just need to give it at least 6 game ticks in order to reset. If someone's not coming along and spamming it with their, fast right click and just doing this with the lever. Next thing is going to be observer stabilization. So I'm sure many of you have had it where you want to have a piston fire in front of an observer face, but if you do, then it's just going to create a clock. So if I was to power this right now, what's going to happen is that's just going to become a constant clock signal. So what we have here is just an observer and sticky piston T flip-flop. So if I have blocks coming into the stream this way, and once it gets to the end, I want them all to get pushed out, boom, I can do that. Or I can just use a little bit of a smart piston with just a little delay on there to stabilize it. So blocks are coming in this way, boom. And last but not least is shifting floors and some pack spawning stuff. So this is a miniature version of what you would see a shifting floor as. And let's say you have something like a witch farm, which, rip witch farms from 118 height map, but whatever. And then you turn it on, and what you want is those floors to shift back and forth so that the mobs will then fall through, and then you can put them all into your kill chamber. Well, this we have a lot of stuff. We have the quartz in the observers. We have the quartz there. We have the soul sand. There's the tinted glass here to keep light out of this path. I mean, obviously you need to finish building this, but on the side there, we have tinted glass. That means you have to find the amethyst in order to do it. But since the glass won't stop pack spawning, we can have pack spawns wander in through this direction. Well, that's all too expensive. So what we can just do here in 119 is we can use dirt, because dirt has a similar height to soul sand. So we can do the same thing. We can also use things like stairs because they will block out the light, but they're a non-solid block, so the pack spawns can still wander through them. And then instead of having any comparators, we can just have a couple of those, smart piston walls. Once again, that we've slowed down to stabilize so the entire thing pushes. But I'll flick off this lever and we can see that that's still going to go back and forth there. So that's just a list of cheapskate ideas. There are some things that I just didn't even try and come up with an alternative for because it's probably just not going to happen. I mean, some instances of sticky pistons, there's just no way around using that sticky piston. So you've got to go out and find that swamp to be able to do it. But we have a lot of nice options here again for those things like your early game, your Skyblock worlds. Okay, I think I'm going to call it there, though, because I should probably go to bed, but this world will once again be available for download if you wanted to come in here and mess around with the stuff. I think you kind of get the general gist idea from the video, but I figured why not go ahead and include the download. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that was entertaining. Again, that was really the main purpose of this video, is overall just entertainment and education about alternatives we have just for some fun. I don't recommend that, using that sand block there is better than using an actual sticky block T flip-flop, because I don't. But I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you later. Have a good one. Bye.